Despite having gigantic parents, Prince Bojji is the smallest person to have ever entered the kingdom of Boss. He has the greatest courage despite being weak, deaf, and naive, and still walks with his head held high. He spends his day playing with the animals that roam his father's property and running around the field. Due to his disabilities, Bojji avoids playing with kids his age and younger because there might be misunderstandings, and Bojji is frequently the target of ridicule from the public. He encounters Kage, a shadow creature, while going about his daily activities, and Kage immediately holds him at knife point to steal his clothing. After initially finding it difficult to understand Kage, Bojji eventually reads his lips and begins to follow Kage's instructions. When Bojji does so without hesitation, Kage instructs him to do the same thing the following day at the same location. The following day, Bojji meets Kage at the prearranged location while wearing additional clothing so that Kage can rob him of them. Kage declares that Bojji is a moron for obediently following instructions. The two become friends, meeting with Bojji fat in clothes that Kage will take and returning home naked. Bojji then tells him that he appreciates his company and that he only cares about it. When Bojji brings Kage home one day, his stepmother Queen Hilling confronts him and makes fun of him even more for always returning home naked. She requests that Bojji get ready and visit his father. Bojji sobs inwardly as he gets dressed over all the mockery he has endured today, but quickly puts on a brave face when Kage walks by and notices him. Kage begins to empathize with him and develop a stronger emotional attachment to him. Bojji travels to see his father, King Boss, who is ranked 7th overall. The king commands Damasto to instruct Bojji in swordsmanship and tells him that he must grow in strength to rule his kingdom. Damas agrees and moves to carry out the request. Prince Data, the younger, bigger, and more developed half-brother of Bojji, appears to challenge Damas while they are training. Bojji admires both Damas and Data as they spar. Bojji steps in to defend Damas with his sword after he loses to Data, whose strength he compares to that of King Boss. Everyone who is interested comes to the house to watch the match after it is announced. Data attacks first, but Bojji blocks it repeatedly until he can counterattack by striking Data in the head, impressing everyone in the room, including Kage, who encourages him. Data becomes enraged each time Bojji feints and softly counterattacks her. Damas intervenes and signals to Bojji, who ceases all dodging and is then beaten by Data while sobbing in the middle of the match. When Peas, a sword of the king who has been watching from the roof, throw a spear that ends the fight and declares Data the winner, it gets even more brutal for Bojji. The match leaves Bojji with injuries, and he becomes bedridden and bandaged. He starts to crawl out of bed toward a normal-sized sword and tries to pick it up as he recalls the words Damas signed to him before he stopped dodging Data's attacks. "Your way of fighting is not the swordsmanship of a king." He cries his eyes out until Kage throws a coin at him after failing to pick it up because he is too small and lacks the strength to. As he turns to face Kage, he wipes away his tears and puts on a brave face to avoid embarrassing Kage. Kage assures him that he has nothing to be ashamed of and that only he can wield a sword in such a manner. To avoid further embarrassment, Bojji reveals to Kage where his clothes are, and Kage assures him that from this point forward, he will not be stealing anything from him. While Bojji sleeps, Kage stays by his side. Just as Kage is about to leave, someone enters the room. As Kage is about to assume the worst, she places her hands above the unconscious Bojji, and they glow a magical green, slowly healing Bojji's wounds. She is a woman as evidenced by the feet and the dress at her ankles. Kage departs with the knowledge that Bojji is secure despite his earlier fears. Bibin, a snake handler and Data's swordsmanship instructor, whom Kage had previously met when he first visited the castle where Bojji resides, is introduced to him. Kage was a shadow creature who belonged to a clan of assassins, and Bibin wanted to put him to death for this. However, Kage escaped, and now they are reunited. The announcement that Prince Bojji, the first prince of the kingdom, will take the throne the following day after King Boss passes away and his will is read in front of his corpse shocks everyone. Prince Data is then introduced to the populace of the kingdom as the new king after Queen Hilling shatters the late king's will and disregards his wishes. This offends Bojji, who leaves to sob bitterly. Bibin goes to inform Bojji that Kage has left for a journey, and that they won't see each other again after once more confronting him. A giant snake named Mitsumata that Bojji saved when he was younger now lives in the snake lair where he goes looking for Kage on his own. Bojji is informed by Mitsumata that his master Bibin has captured Kage but allowed him to leave on a crucial journey that he is unable to share with Bojji. He assures him, however, that it is not done to hurt him. Bojji decides to follow Kage after recalling how he was chosen to be king but was rejected because he was weak. Kage had also promised to stand by his side and is now on a mission to assist him. When he approaches the queen to ask about the journey, she declines for the same reasons every time. He then decides to leave the castle by scaling a window located on a high floor. Just before he lets go of the makeshift rope he constructed, the queen enters. Bojji struggles as Dorsh, the queen's shield, pull him up, causing the ropes to come loose and sending him tumbling to the ground. Suddenly groaning loudly and glowing in a green light, Queen Hilling rushes to Bojji and discovers him unconscious. She tears her dress and places her hands on Bojji to treat his wounds. She visited him while he was sleeping the night of the match, and Bojji can still remember her. Hilling recalls her first encounter with Bojji and the challenges she faced to develop the kind of relationship she has with Bojji as she is left to rest alone. She becomes a little softer as a result, allowing Bojji to embark on the journey to grow in knowledge, experience, and strength. She equips him with Damaz, his teacher, and Hokuro, a caregiver for his personal needs. Bojji departs on his adventure. The group arrives in a village first, where Bojji flees Hokuro to have fun watching puppet shows, shopping for random items at the market, and sleeping by the fountains. He is later discovered by Damaz and Hokuro without his bag, which contained all the important items, and Hokuro receives criticism for initially misplacing Bojji. The group then has dinner to unwind and consider their next move. The following morning, when they start their journey, they come across Bojji's bag on the sidewalk. They decide to continue walking through the treacherous forests and plain valleys with everything still intact. While they are walking, Bojji becomes interested in a butterfly and starts to follow it. He encounters the spearman who owns the pit after falling into it. When new animals are born from the dead one, they are eating. The man kills a wild pig, feasts with Bojji, and they dance together. Then, after explaining the procedure to Bojji, the man decides he wants to sacrifice Bojji so that more new lives can be made from his. Bojji can get away from the man and joins his group. As they set up camp to sleep for the night, Bojji's meat is stabbed with knives that were thrown from a distance that the three of them were unable to see. They discover a pack of dogs lying dead on the ground in the morning after consuming poisoned meat that Bojji had stabbed. After burying the dogs, they travel to a different town with a pit leading to the underworld known as the Gates of Hell. Damaz takes Bojji to see the Gates of Hell and instructs Hokuro to locate a place for them to spend the night. As soon as they arrive, Damaz shoves Bojji into the fire pit and abandons him there to burn. But as Kage emerges from his bag and the two of them reunite in tears of friendship, Bojji manages to land safely on the pit floor. Bojji is informed by Kage that he has been with him ever since the moment he fell from the window while trying to flee until the moment he attempted to eat the poisoned meat. He explains to him that Bibin, the snake handler, sent him to go with Bojji to meet the man who will make him strong. To meet this man, the journey they are about to embark on takes them further into the underworld. As they descend to their destination, Bojji begins to smell gas, which causes them to pass out. Bojji and Kage are taken to the back of two vehicles by two men who emerge from the smoke. They are transported to a kingdom of the underworld, another kingdom. When they awaken, they are welcomed by King Dessa, the kingdom's ruler and the second-ranked person in the system. He begins to mock Bojji for his flaws and the fact that his younger brother is the current king instead of him. When he inquires about their motivations, Kage replies that they have come to see a man who can transform a weak man into one with the strength of a king. King Dessa acknowledges that he is the person they are looking for and that he needs to assess the trainee's aptitude. Bojji is being tested by one of his knights who brought Kage and Bojji to the kingdom. Bojji is instructed to attack the knight, who also happens to be a captain of the Order of the Underworld, a group known for their tenacity. Bojji gives it his all, striking the guard with gentle blows as he stands helplessly after realizing the gravity of the situation. Before Kage again stands up for Bojji, Dessa makes fun of his frailty. He explains to Dessa that Bojji's skill at precisely dodging blows is what makes him so formidable. Bojji ignores Dessa's order to stop letting the guard watch over him. The knights in the room are impressed by how quickly and precisely he avoids the attacks. They all look to Dessa for approval when the knight battling Bojji pauses and remarks on his quickness. Dessa, who is still unimpressed, says Bojji can survive a battle but can't triumph because he can't penetrate his foe's armor. Dessa is persuaded to teach Bojji, but despite Kage's efforts, he refuses, claiming that he cannot develop an inexistent talent. King Dessa issues an order for the two to be expelled. Kage tells Bojji not to give up and that if he works hard, they will grow stronger. Bojji is inspired to pick up a large rock with failure, followed by a smaller rock with continued failure. When he acknowledges his weakness, he sobs. Kage heads over to console him. They are instructed to deliver the letter of recommendation they brought with them to the appropriate person by the night Bojji had fought. They are informed that Prince Despa, the king's younger brother, is responsible. King Dessa didn't tell them sooner because he was in a rivalry with Despa, and was only playing a joke on them to amuse himself. After expressing gratitude to the knights, the two go meet Prince Despa. They make an introduction and explain why they are there. Despa requests payment for his services, and after Kage gives it, he extends an invitation inside. He then reads Bojji's hands and discovers that Bojji is helpless and lacks even a trace of strength throughout his entire body. However, he still adopts him and mentors him to help him reach his full potential. After getting acquainted with the home, Bojji and Kage retire to bed. The following morning, Bojji rises early. He cleans the house and prepares a special breakfast for himself because he is a baby giant. Despa then prepares to instruct him. Every day, Bojji trains resolutely until one day, while Kage is outside cleaning, he hears a loud bang that shakes the ground. He rushes into the training room Bojji is in, which he is not allowed to enter, and inquires about the loud noise and the well-being of Despa and Bojji. Kage sees a glimpse of Bojji posing in front of a rock that has been split in half when Despa opens the door to respond to Kage's inquiries. He feels the door slowly close in his face and wonders how Bojji is doing. Bojji finally completes his training after fully mastering the Despa arts, which served as Despa's method of instruction. To celebrate Bojji's successful training, Kage, Despa, and Bojji travel together. But as they leave, Kage notices that Bojji is carrying a sword and inquiries about it. Kage is impressed by Bojji's use of it. But when he takes it out of the sheath, Kage is greatly let down by its thin, needle-like appearance. When Despa informs Kage that giving Bojji a needle and calling it a sword is not going to help anyone, Kage challenges him about his skepticism. After offering Bojji an apology, they both proceed to their celebration. While they are eating, 3 demonic beings from the underworld approach the group and begin to fight. They make fun of Despa's appearance, and he responds by punching one of them, which he immediately regrets. When Bojji notices that Despa is being attacked by a group of monsters, he doesn't stand by and lets them beat him up. He tries to defend himself but is quickly shoved aside. He stands back up and delivers a daisy soft blow to the monster's chin after dodging a few blows. After a brief period, the monster begins to lose his balance and collapses, making Bojji's punch official as a knockout. After dodging a few attacks from the monster, Bojji finally draws his weapon, the needle sword, and defeats him in a flash of lightning as the monster falls to the ground wailing in agony. Despa checks his vitals and discovers that he just passed out as before, despite Kage's fears that Bojji killed the monster. The science behind Bojji's ineffective attacks that still have great effects is then revealed to Kage by Despa. The punch was placed in time just right, and the needle was stabbed without doing much damage to the brain or blood vessels. Bojji wins, and Kage congratulates him. The 3 then return home. Despa instructs Bojji and Kage to proceed first on the way home because he has something to take care of. He dashes around the corner to find the monsters that Bojji had just vanquished and pays them for taking part in the battle. When Kage and Bojji are outside later that evening, Kage decides to finally tell Bojji what has been happening in his castle after hearing it from Bibin. Kage asks Bojji what he will do after hearing all of this, and Bojji, remembering how Damaz had betrayed him, becomes concerned that Queen Hilling might kill him. Kage follows him as he begins to walk and inquires about his lack of courage. Bojji then starts to punch himself and hits his head on the floor to regain his composure before leaving for his house. Bojji and Kage said goodbye to Despa and left for their house. Bojji is urged by Despa to accept himself as he is and keep displaying his courage. The 3 men are still saying their goodbyes when the Knights of the Order of the Underworld appear and offer to take Bojji back to his kingdom. Despa explains to them that this is because the kingdom has been infiltrated by criminals from the underworld, and King Dessa has sent the knights to retrieve Bojji and apprehend the criminals. As the knights identify the offenders, Kage continues to uplift Bojji with his newly discovered strength in the Despa arts. The knights go on to describe to Kage and Bojji how criminals easily entered the kingdom. When Kage and Bojji finally reach the kingdom, they discover that a criminal has fled the castle and is now pursuing innocent bystanders. Even Despa advised the knight not to fight the criminal until he showed up, making him one of the most dangerous. After slicing up the populace, the criminal known as Alkan, the Sword of the Underworld, will now face the captain of the Underworld Order, who is battling Despa. The knight prevents Bojji from participating in the fight because Despa had predicted that Bojji would lose to Alkan if he faced him. Bojji is instructed by the knight to go to the castle and assist in defending Queen Hilling. Bojji and Kage hastily travel to the castle.